Hi everyone, Julie here. Today I would like to make a quick video to address something that used to demotivate me a lot as a beginner. It's all the videos on YouTube of people saying they learned XYZ language in a month, 2 weeks, 1 week, 24 hours. And I like to talk about it because I think if you're not an expert language learner, by expert, I mean that you've been doing it for a while, not that you're like the best at it, right? If you're not, if you haven't been learning languages for a long time, you might think that is true, like just that, it's possible to just learn a language in 2 weeks. And so I like to share with you my personal experience of doing something a little bit similar, but I like to explain to you why I was able to learn Portuguese in 2 months and what I mean by learning Portuguese. So basically, to give you a little bit of backstory, so I'm a native French speaker. I've been speaking English for about almost 20 years now because I started very young because I was obsessed with Harry Potter and I was like reading the books and watching the movies and stuff. Then I've been speaking Spanish for about 10 years. Um, and I also knew a little bit of Italian, which I've kind of kept up, but to the bare minimum, to be honest. And I started Arabic about a year ago. And while I was in Jordan learning Arabic, I was really, I don't know why I got like obsessed with Portuguese and I was like, I need to learn Portuguese. I need to go to Brazil and learn Portuguese and like be in Brazil. So what I did was I took my knowledge of French and Spanish and I started watching telenovelas and reality TV and like just documentaries and just like everything I could in Brazilian Portuguese. And I would not put any subtitles and I would just kind of let it like wash over me and understand the gist of what people were saying. And slowly, I could figure out more and more words because it sounded like something similar in French or Spanish. So my brain automatically started associating the Portuguese version of the words to what I knew in French or Spanish or English sometimes. So this is how I started with a lot of input. And then when I went to Brazil, I stayed there for almost 2 months. And I just kind of showed up, started speaking Portuñol, which is a mix of Spanish and Portuguese. I would kind of study the patterns of transformation between Spanish and Portuguese, between French and Portuguese, and then use the Spanish word or the French word, depending on the mood, right? And just Portuguese it. Sometimes it wasn't correct because it's like one letter off or one sound off, but most of the time people could still understand me, and then I would like hear how they would pronounce the word, and I would kind of learn it. Something else I did was I looked up the false cognates. So cognates are like words that, like I said, from Spanish to Portuguese, they will sound very similar. They'll be spelt the way same way sometimes. So these are cognates. So false cognates or like false friends are words that you think mean the same thing, but they actually don't. So for example, between Spanish and Portuguese, we have acordar. So acordarse in Spanish is to remember, but acordar in Portuguese is to wake up. So these little false friends, actively looked them up, wrote them down, made flashcards, and learned them. Um, this is what I did. And with a normal amount of practice every day, just talking to people, I was able to get to a fairly decent conversational level in Portuguese. Now, do I speak Portuguese? For my definition of speaking languages, I'd say yes, because I can have conversations about many different topics. I very often lack a couple of words in like on specific things. But usually I either look it up and learn it, or people they tell me the word and I'm like, okay, I can link it to something that's vaguely similar in French or Spanish, right? So this is what I mean by I speak Portuguese. I'm not, I don't know every single Portuguese word that exists. I would struggle if I heard someone from Angola or Portugal speaking Portuguese, for example. So yeah. So how do these people online learn languages so fast? Well, they do the same thing. If you look at, I'm not going to name anyone because it's not the point, but if you look at some specific YouTubers, right, that said that they learned, I don't know, Portuguese in a week, for example. Well, you probably know who I'm talking about now. Like this person already spoke French and Spanish to a very high level, and English, and I think another maybe Italian as well. So it helps. Like of course, if you speak three Romance languages, learning the fourth one is going to be super easy and fast compared to learning your first Romance languages, especially if you start with French, for example, like that's really difficult. And so, yeah, I think it sucks that people don't emphasize on that. I feel like a lot of them are not very honest. They don't tell you that they already spoke very similar languages. Something that they do mention, almost all of them, and I think that's quite interesting, and you should definitely focus on that, is that they don't waste any time on the useless stuff, right? So they will learn very, very common words, very, very common verbs, very versatile vocabulary. So like if you look at the language that we use on a daily basis, we use a lot of the same verbs. We use a lot of to go, to be, to have, to do, to want, to need, must, can, what else? Like just, these very basic common verbs. And once you have those, even if you don't know something a bit more specific, you can always kind of work your way around it if you're a bit creative. And I think that's the one thing we should take away from these videos, even though they're a little bit clickbaity, they're a little bit BS in my opinion, but I think the one takeaway from them is that if you focus on the common vocabulary, you don't waste your time on very tricky grammar, very abstract concepts. If you don't waste your time on all of that, you will be able to get to a conversational level fairly fast. I'm not saying 1 week because I think that's not realistic, but a few months for sure. But you won't be perfect. So you need to pick your side. You're either, going to spend a lot more time to reach perfection before you feel like, okay, now I can speak, or you're just going to like throw yourself out there and speak, even if your sentences are still a little bit, not very correct. So this was my input on this topic of, can you learn a language very fast? Yes, you can, if you already know other languages that are very similar. And if your brain is already used to learning languages and, kind of grasping all the patterns and the logic of the language and the grammar very fast, okay? So yeah, I hope that was helpful for you. And if you need any more help or tips on, I don't know, languages or French or anything, feel free to message me on Instagram. I'm always happy to chat about languages. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Bye.